Hello, and welcome to the fourth class in the second volume of the Biological Fitness Workshop. We are going to do something today that we have not yet done, which is we are going to do an awareness through movement lesson that is done while sitting in a chair. So I want to say a few things about the process, but just so you know, so you can get prepared, you're going to need a chair that has hard surface. So not a squishy chair, but your basic kind of like kitchen chair maybe. And that's what you're going to need. So a chair that you can sit in comfortably, a comfortable height off of the floor for your stature, and no wheels. You don't want a rolly chair. You'll see why that is when we get into it, but that's what you're going to need. And as you know, in awareness through movement, we explore movement for a time, and then we pause and we rest. And usually we're lying on the back. And during those rest periods, we are noticing changes in how our back and the back of our body as a whole rests on the floor. So for this lesson, since we're in the chair, you can just rest on the backrest during the rests, or you can stand up and walk around a little bit and feel how walking is. Or if you'd like to have that option, you can have a space available on the floor where from time to time you might lie down. Now, I'm not going to probably leave a whole lot of time for you to get down onto the floor and get back up throughout. So what I'm going to suggest is that you stay in the chair, but I just want to clarify that you have those different options. Okay, so in terms of what we're looking at today, and what we're always looking at in some way in this class series, is how do we deal with gravity, right? And we've already looked at the question of the connection that we make to the ground, most often with the soles of our feet, but just the basic sense that there is a supporting surface underneath us. And today, part of that surface will be the chair underneath your pelvis. And how can we form a connection that helps us to then also have a clear connection up through the internal support of the skeleton, right? So we're going to be building on that idea today. But a really interesting feature of what we're going to do today is I think it's a really good opportunity to clarify how gravity is not only a skeletal sense, but it's an emotional sense. So you just think about when you see a friend and it looks like they're not having a good day, you might ask them, are you feeling a little down, right? Down. And, you know, what does it mean when you have an emotion that feels heavy, right? Like you're sinking. And so now you can kind of get a sense of gravity, right? Like, and then on a wonderful day, everything's going beautifully, right? Do you have a sense of lightness? Do you feel like there's that phrase, you're walking on air, right? And so Moshe Feldenkrais actually used to talk about a sort of an ideal way of being in your body. It would feel like you were levitating. Right? So we're actually going to play today with seeing if we can produce a feeling that has a little more, you could say, levity to it. And of course, there's two different ways of you thinking of levity, like you're literally levitating, you're floating upwards, but levity is the opposite of gravity in the sense of something that's very serious, very grave, right? So you can even hear in our language, there's this connection between the skeletal sense and the emotional sense in the way that I'm describing it. This is also a lesson about posture. There's another loaded word for you, right? What is good posture? Well, most people answer this question by sort of describing how the body should be positioned, how the body should be aligned, and that definitely is part of it, right? If you're slumped, your posture is kind of collapsed. You're not getting that support. You're not getting that sense of lift up from the ground that we're talking about here. But another way of describing posture isn't so much in terms of the exact position that you're in, but it's a sense of poise, a sense of being ready. And so Feldenkrais famously said that good posture is the ability to be ready to move in any direction without preparation or hesitation. So that means you have this readiness. I sometimes have used this kind of silly image of if you're sitting in a chair, like what we're going to do today, and people were throwing tomatoes at you from different directions, you could dodge them, right? You could shift left or go forward or move your head backwards, right? You could go all of these places, and your musculature, your sense of where you are in space, it's all adaptive and ready. You're not going to get stuck because someone throws the tomato from a particular direction and you can't move where you need to move. Now, you could go in any direction. And when that's the case, it also means that your musculature is in a particular state. If you're really tight in one place and really open in another, you're not going to have the same capacity to go in one direction versus the other. And most of us are like that. We have these little imbalances, but if we can go through a process that begins to maybe make a little more of a sense of an equal distribution of effort, which was another criteria for good posture that Feldenkrais defined, then maybe we're also ready to go here or go there. So the interesting thing that we're going to do here is we're going to work more on being ready to go here or go there rather than where are we positioning ourselves to have good posture. There'll be a lot about positioning too, you'll see, but it's in the context of movement. It's not in the context of just sitting still, which is how people often think of posture. Okay, so those are some basic ideas. And lastly, I'll just tell you that what we're literally going to practice is how to come from sitting in your chair up into standing. And if you think about that, that's something you do every day. There's other versions of it too, like getting into your car and getting out of your car. And for a lot of people, sitting down is kind of like plopping down, and they go, ugh, and they land, and there's sort of a shock that just goes through the whole spine. And then for a lot of people standing up, there's also a kind of, like they sort of grunt and they use momentum and they thrust themselves up and out of the chair and they get the job done. They're standing, but there was this extra effort that had to be brought in that moment when they wanted to lift themselves up against gravity. And those little habits, when you repeat them and repeat them and repeat them and then repeat them, they begin to take a toll on the integrity of your spine and many other things, right? So the idea in improving this particular movement is also that we're creating a habit that will serve us when we go and do this movement day in and day out. So that's the value of learning to come from sitting to standing with more lightness, more grace, more ease, more sense of levity. All right. So that's what we're going to do. And hopefully you've already found a chair that you can use. So now please come to sit in your chair. And don't change how you're sitting, but notice how you're sitting. Are you leaning on the backrest? And the bottom of your pelvis against the chair? How does that feel? Is there more weight on one side of the pelvis or the other? What are you doing with your feet? Are they connected to the floor? Maybe you've got your heels up and you're just touching the floor with your toes. Just notice what you're doing. And tomorrow night at dinner, you can also notice what you're doing. There's just a way that people sit in a chair and they arrange themselves a particular way and don't really think about it. And of course, you can sit any way you like, but if you consider that, and again, don't move, you don't have to be frozen, but just stay exactly how you were sitting right now. And imagine I asked you to stand up, or it was time to go somewhere and stand up. Don't stand up, but just feel from the particular way that you've positioned yourself in the chair right now. What would it be like to stand up? And more specifically, could you stand up in one single movement from where you are? So now I'll give you the opportunity to change your position, okay? Sit in the chair in such a way that in one single movement, you could come to standing. So you're on the chair and you have a fair amount of weight on your pelvis, but in one movement, you could be all the way standing with your weight over your legs. Where would you sit on the chair? Would you sit on the back of the chair? Would you lean on the backrest? Or would you come to the front of the chair? And where would you place your feet so that in one movement, you could come up and be over your feet? So I'm going to guess that you're sitting at the front of your chair right now. Now, if you were to go back to lean on the backrest, notice also that your connection to the chair, a lot of that connection is the flesh of your thighs, right? And I was talking before we began the lesson, a kind of a funny situation where you're sitting in the chair and people are throwing tomatoes at you. Suppose you had to dodge left and right, but you're sitting at the back of the chair. How much movement is possible with your thighs on the chair like that? And then come to the front of the chair and really feel that you're sitting on your sit bones. And from here, if you needed to duck and weave a little bit, if you wanted to dance in your chair, how mobile are you here? And so without even having begun a process of exploring movements, just the positioning you can see is very different in terms of action because there's a potential for action. You're sitting in the chair and maybe you're sitting in the chair and you know that you're going to be talking with your friends for the next hour. You're not going anywhere. You don't even have it in your mind that you're going to stand up. Well, then it might seem natural to sit at the back of the chair. But if you thought that you needed to get up, or you might need to be able to get up, even though you're not sure when that's going to happen, but maybe something's going to happen and you need to move quickly and you want to be ready for that, then you want to be poised. You want to be maybe a little more perched at the front of your chair. Okay, so please do that. Come to the front of your chair and put your feet in a position where you could imagine coming to stand. And now I'm going to ask you to make a movement which is not coming to stand, but it's the beginning of coming to stand. So just imagine you wanted to stand up and you'll make a movement. Probably your head will come forward in space. The weight on your pelvis will shift slightly because you're thinking that you're going to lift your bottom off the chair, you're going to stand up, but don't take your bottom off the chair. Just do a tiny little movement like that. And then it's as if you said to yourself, no, I'm not going to stand up. And then you go back to just your starting position. So you're poised at the front of the chair and you think of standing, but the action that you make is like 1% of the movement of coming to standing, and then you let go. And you keep doing this, okay? As if you were going to stand, you just make the first little mobilization you feel throughout your body. There's a preparation, there's a little activation, and your head moves through space a little bit, and maybe you're coming forward because, of course, standing is not just coming up out of the chair, it's moving forward to be over your feet. And as you keep doing this, just pay attention to all the very many details of what's happening. So when your head comes forward, does it come directly forward, or does it seem that your head is coming out a little more over one knee than the other? And please don't change it. Just observe. If your head is coming a little more towards one knee, it could be that one of your shoulders is going further forward than the other. It could be that your breastbone is turning a little more to the left or a little more to the right. And you're not trying to change it, but you're just using the repetition to clarify these things. So pause each time, but then as you initiate the movement again, and maybe now you're a little clearer on what's going on with your head and your shoulders and your chest, what's happening in each of your hip joints? Are you folding a little more over one hip than the other? What do you do with your knees? What do you feel in your knees? Is there one knee that's coming a little further forward? Or maybe the knees are coming backwards. What are the knees doing? And what's happening to the pressure under the soles of your feet? Even in this very tiny beginning of thinking of coming to stand, if you pay attention to the connection to the ground, do you kind of get the sense that if you continued, you would stand up and have the weight more over one leg than the other? And this may be connected again to where your head is going in space, what you're doing with your breastbone. And the pressure between the soles of your feet and the floor, what's happening there? Is it moving in the same direction as you feel the pressure moving underneath your sit bones on the chair? Does the weight move towards your heels as you think of coming up to stand? Does it move towards your toes? And that's a question you can ask yourself about each of your 2 feet, because it could be that you sense that with one foot, the weight is going more towards the front of the foot, and with the other foot, it's going more to the back. So you can see that even without coming all the way to stand, even in this very first moment, if you take the time, there's a whole pattern of action throughout your whole skeleton that begins to be revealed, and it's a very specific pattern. Okay, so rest now for a moment. And then if you chose to rest on the back of your chair, come to the front again. And now you're going to make a movement that will probably feel similar to what you were just doing, but we're going to really think of it much differently. So the idea is you have no intention of standing up, but now just gently take your weight a little more to the front of your pelvis and a little more to the back of your pelvis. So you're rolling your pelvis on the chair towards the front of the chair, towards the back of the chair. And you don't have to do much. Just go a little forward and a little back. And just pay attention to that connection. If you keep your eyes more or less forward, looking on the horizon, and you go very slowly, can you kind of get a sense of the shape of your sits bones underneath you? Does it feel a little bit like you're going over a speed bump where there's a place in the middle where you're the tallest, and then if you go a little forward, you kind of sink down, then you go back and you rise up, and then if you keep going back, you kind of sink down again. See if you can get a sense that there's a sort of highest point on your pelvis that you could be sitting on, and you have to go slowly to find it. And notice, what are you doing with your spine? What are you doing with your head? Because there's more than one thing that you could be doing. So I just suggested that you keep your eyes to the horizon. So try rolling your pelvis forward and back, and let your head move forward and back. But have the sense that you're not really looking up or down. And maybe the most of this movement is like a folding and unfolding in your hip joints. It's like you were bowing. So you have length in your spine, but your head, your chest come a little forward and then a little back. The front of your hips are opening and closing. Okay? Or you could do something differently. You could lower your head and you could allow your back to round. So when you look down, you let your chest soften and slide down in the direction of your abdomen. And then as you look up, you let your belly fill, you lift your chest. And so probably if you do it this way, when you're looking down, you'll be rolling back. And think of the middle of your back going further back than any other place. So you're fairly round, like a letter C. And then as you come forward, think of filling your belly and lifting your chest, maybe looking a little up to the ceiling, the chin rising a little away from the chest. And this is a really nice movement to just try to involve your whole spine rather than just lifting and lowering your head. Feel that you round yourself and arch. And as you're doing this movement too, just notice if there's a little sense when you come forward, you look a little up if you're looking a little more to one side. When you lower your head, does it look like you're looking towards one side more than the other? So you go forward a little more, maybe on one sit bone, and back a little more on the other. Okay, so pause in your chair. And now you're going to do the same kind of thing, rolling forward and back on your sit bones, but actually shift yourself so you're really mostly on your right sit bone. And stay on the right sit bone and just take the pelvis forward and back like this. And again, just notice what you do with other parts of yourself. How are you using your two legs now that the weight is more to one side? Maybe you feel it's a different activation on the side where you have the weight compared to the side where maybe the sit bone, the other sit bone feels slightly lifted away from the chair, even if it's still touching. It doesn't have the same weight. And feel what happens in the soles of your feet. Okay, and then come to just sit with your weight more in the middle, but notice if the connection to the chair through the right sit bone feels rather different than what you feel on the left. And notice even if the quality of your breathing feels different side to side. And then shift your weight over onto the left side. And again, move a little forward and back. Again, just being curious about your whole skeleton. It's the idea of being on the left sit bone and moving the pelvis forward and back. That's just to set up a situation where you're listening to your whole self. And what in particular do you feel here? And what seems slightly different than the experience that you had of rocking when you were on your right sit bone? And then come to more of a middle place and just do a few more movements, going forward and back. See if you feel more centered now. And then before you rest, pause for a moment and go back to that first idea of preparing to stand without actually lifting your bottom out of the chair. But now if you think that you wanted to come to stand, just notice if the pattern is any different than it was a few moments ago after exploring rocking the pelvis over one sit bone and the other. Now as you come forward, what's happening with your head, your chest, your hip joints, soles of your feet? And then just one time, in order to see what it's like, actually do stand up. And now as you're standing, just think, how was that? Was that a lot of work? Was that an effort? Did you maybe hold your breath when you came to stand? And then when you sit down, just notice how you do that. Do you have a sense that you drop down and then just sort of fall into the chair at the end because you know the chair is there to catch you? Or did you very gently place your pelvis on the chair and lower yourself without a sound? So those are two different ways you could do it, right? Just notice what you did. You're back in the chair now. Come to the front of the chair as if you were going to come to stand in one movement. But instead of standing, bring your attention to each of your legs. And now ask yourself a question again, which is about a movement potential, not an actual movement. And please don't make this movement, but imagine lifting one foot off the floor. And imagine lifting the other foot off the floor. And only through your imagination, try to determine for yourself which leg would be lighter to lift. And so just keep imagining one leg, imagining the other, but you'll probably feel some sense of preparation for the action. And does the preparation feel like a bigger effort on one side? Okay, so at this point, if you'd like to test out your prediction, just lift one foot an inch off the floor and put it down, and then lift the other and see which leg was lighter. Was it the one you thought it was going to be lighter? Okay, whichever leg does seem easier to lift right now, you're going to work with that leg. So keep the other foot placed firmly on the floor, but with the leg that you've chosen, just lift the foot maybe 1 inch and then put it down and rest it. Let go of the work you did, but then once you feel that you've completely let go, you do it again. And you're making a little study here. And the question you keep asking yourself is, how can I make the leg feel lighter the next time I lift it than I felt on the movement I just did? So find different ways of lifting the foot off the floor. And when we say lift, we just think of something going up and away from the ground. But of course, when you lift your foot, you can probably feel the other foot gets heavier, doesn't it? And when you lift the foot, the feeling of your pelvis in the chair changes, because you're still bringing the same amount of body weight down towards the floor somehow, down into the chair. So you're shifting the weight. You're lifting the foot, but you're counterbalancing the weight of the leg by shifting on your pelvis, or maybe you notice that you're moving your head in space. So use that idea now. Lift your foot and move your head in space. You could move it backwards. You could move it to the side. Just find out how kind of rocking yourself in your chair in different ways can help you to lift the leg. So it's not just something the leg does with no assistance from the rest of you, but you kind of make these movements like on a seesaw. One side goes up, the other side goes down. The leg is going up, but what could you do with your upper body? And you'll find that there's particular directions that you can go that make the leg feel a little lighter. And then some directions you might say, oh, that was awkward because the leg actually felt a little heavier. Okay, so pause for a moment. And here's another simple thing you can do to make the leg feel lighter. Just reach down and interlace your fingers on the back of your thigh, just above the knee. And before you do anything, just feel that you've created this connection from your leg all the way up to your shoulders because your hands are clasped there. So now when you lean back, the leg comes off the floor, but think that you're doing nothing with the muscles in your leg, right? Your leg is hanging from your hands. And keep doing what you were doing. Lean this way, lean that way, but really feel no work in the leg. Okay. And after a few movements like that, just come to sit at the front of your chair again without moving. But if you imagine lifting one leg and lifting the other one now, is it even clearer, the sense that one leg would be lighter? And actually test it out. Lift one foot off the floor 1 inch and lift the other. And just feel that one leg really seems a lot heavier than the other. Now, assuming that your two legs basically do weigh the same amount, what's the difference? Well, notice the sense of participation of the whole body as you lift the one leg versus the other. Which leg feels more connected to your upper body? Which leg feels more isolated? So now it'd probably be nice to create that same sense of lightness with the other leg. So begin to lift it just an inch and put it down. Or you could even think that you lift it just so that the sole of your foot doesn't press the floor as much. You might do a tiny lift, right? What's the smallest movement you can make, but feel that you're mobilizing? And then where does that mobilization show up? In the leg itself, in your upper body. And then you can lift the leg more if you want. Lift the leg, again, in various ways, taking your weight in the chair forward or back or to the side, leaning here and there. You could even reach your arms through space if you like, right? So you're taking the weight of that foot, that leg away from the floor, but you're placing the weight in other places. So long as you don't fall out of your chair, you can try anything you like, right? And then again, hold this leg, this second leg. You can interlace the fingers behind the thigh. And so that you sense that there's this just sort of like a unit between your shoulders, your arms, and your leg. They're all sort of connected, but you can take your weight here and take your weight there. And you can hold your leg in other ways. Maybe you take one hand out from behind the knee and you bring it to the front of the kneecap, which repositions your shoulders. Maybe it makes you want to turn your chest more to one side. And again, from here, you lift the foot from the floor, but again, trying to do the least work you can in the leg itself. All right, and now let go, come back to the front of the chair and lift one foot and lift the other and see if the two legs are a little more similar now. And as you keep going, it's not so much like walking in your chair, although it's kind of like that, but remember to pause when you put the foot down, right? So that you can really sense each movement and notice little details of your sensation rather than just following the directions. I lift one foot, I lift the other, I lift one foot, I lift the other. You want to be engaged, right? You want to be really listening. But if one side is easier, what are you doing on that side that you could maybe transfer to how you lift the other foot so that they become more and more similar? Here's another clue. Notice, what do you do with the foot that stays on the ground? Is the foot that stays on the ground, is the pressure in the foot towards the front of the foot, towards the back, more towards the inside, more towards the outside? Where is the pressure on the standing foot when you lift the leg that feels lighter? And where is the pressure on the foot that stays on the ground when you lift the leg that doesn't feel as light? That might be part of why one leg feels lighter. Okay, so just pause for a moment. And now, again, you lift one leg, but here's a new idea. Can you lift the leg as if you were about to stand on it? Now, just try to think for yourself, how is that different than just lifting the leg any old way, right? And if you think about it, you do this all the time in daily life. How do you lift your foot as you go up the stairs? Right? You lift it in order to put it on the next stair, and then you're going to bring the whole weight of your body over that foot because you're going to lift the other one. even just walking on a flat surface, there's a way that you lift your weight, you lift your foot as if to put weight on that leg, right? But what does this mean for your upper body? So now think about if you were standing halfway up the stairs and you were about to take the next step, what would you do with your head? Would you take your head backwards? I'm guessing you probably wouldn't do that if you were on a flight of stairs, right? Doesn't seem very safe. You probably want to somehow take your head forward, wouldn't you? So see if even just, again, you're staying in the chair, but with that idea that like you're walking up a flight of stairs, you lift one leg, put it down, and you lift the other, but as if you were going up a flight of stairs, what would you do with your head? So maybe your head would be coming a little forward towards the knee. Maybe the top of your head would be reaching a little up towards the ceiling. Okay, so here's another way to notice the same thing. Lift one leg and then just drop it. So you lift it an inch off the floor and then just let go and it just plops back down. You feel it kind of reverberate. And do this with one leg a number of times. Okay, lift it and drop it. Lift it and drop it. And then do that with the other leg. And now lift the leg and drop it. But the next time you do that, the moment that the foot hits the floor, stand up with your weight over that leg. So maybe you lift the left foot, you put it down, but the second the left foot hits the ground, you stand up from the chair and maybe you're turned a little to the left. And then you come back down and sit in the chair, lift the right foot, drop it and immediately stand up with your weight over the right leg, right? So you're lifting your leg and then you're putting the weight on it, right? And you feel, again, how if you were to just come back down in the chair now and then with no idea of standing up, no idea of putting weight on the leg, just lifting the leg any old way, how that's different than what you do when you lift the leg, drop it, and stand over the same leg that you just dropped. And notice as you keep playing with these ideas, and you can sometimes just stay in the chair, lift the leg, and another time lift it and stand over the leg. But notice, where does your knee go and where does your pelvis go? When is the knee going forward? When is the knee going back? Okay, and now sit in your chair and sit at the front of your chair now. And just imagine standing. Don't do it, but see if you feel a little more poised, a little more ready to stand. And listen to your breathing. What's the quality of your breathing when you're ready to stand? And now, even if you don't go to the back of your chair, just suppose, no, you're not going to stand. You're just going to be in this chair for a while. There's no need to be ready for standing. And where do you go on your pelvis? And what happens to your breathing? And what you might feel is that you just relaxed a little. You're not getting ready to stand. You don't have to be as alert. So maybe in that sense, it feels like you let go of doing some work. But maybe you also feel you don't have the same support. You couldn't come to standing in one movement. And how do you breathe here? So there's an interesting thing to notice here. It might feel like being more engaged, in a sense, doing more work creates better support, better breath than something that you might think of as relaxation. Now, I don't know exactly what you're feeling, but that could be the sense of it. So it's just worth noticing what this sense of poise is about. But hopefully what's beginning to happen is if you're poised and ready to stand, but you think you could stand up to the left, or you could stand up to the right, or you could stand up and go here, go there after you stand, you have a little more of a sense of equal distribution. That's what you were kind of cultivating by lifting the one foot, lifting the other, and doing it in those different ways. Okay, so come to the place where you could be ready to stand in one movement. And then just to see how things are at this point, go ahead and stand. And how did that compare to the first time that you did it? Now, just take a look to see where that chair is behind you. You're still standing. But now be a little more mindful and take a little more time as you go back to sit in the chair, and have the idea that you're going to place your bottom very lightly on the chair. Now, if you feel that you're beginning to just want to drop yourself to the chair, instead come back up to standing. Don't plunk down into the chair. But think again about this question of what you're doing with your head. Now, of course, your knees are going to bend. You have to bend your knees. But instead of thinking of just lowering your pelvis to the chair, can you think of reaching your pelvis backwards as you bend your knees? And maybe take your head forward, right? Because if you take your head back and your pelvis back, then you just kind of have to plunk down, don't you? But the more you bend your knees, can you think of taking your head out over your knees? And just see if you can reach back, back, back with your pelvis until you find the chair and sit down. Okay, and then stay in the chair. And then, as you were doing earlier, roll your pelvis a little towards the front of the chair and a little towards the back of the chair. And just feel the pressure on the bottom of your pelvis. It goes a little forward, it goes a little back, right? What are your knees doing? Probably your knees are also going forward and back, aren't they? And notice, do they go forward and back with the pelvis? In other words, you go to the front of your pelvis on the chair and you see your knees, you feel that your knees are going forward. And then when you roll to the back of your pelvis, your knees are going backwards. Maybe your hands are on your legs, you can feel that. Okay, but now just imagine, and you can experiment, would it be possible to roll the tiniest bit forward in the chair, but actually have the sense that your knees are coming towards you, that you're drawing your legs a little bit into your hip joints? Now that might not feel very natural, but just see if you can find something like that. Okay, and then stop that for a moment. But think again that you're walking up the stairs and lift one leg as if you're going to stand on it. And put it down and keep going to the same side. But notice you lift the foot from the floor, but does the knee go forward or back? So think that you lift the leg and you sort of draw it into you, but you're taking your head out towards the knee. Right? And then try this with the other leg. So we've already had this idea, lift the leg as if you're going to stand on it, but see if that idea, it reverses this relationship between the movement of the pelvis and the movement of the knee. Now, I asked you this a moment ago and you were in the middle just rocking. Now you're going to one side. So we acknowledge that that's different, but does it help you to see that there's maybe a different possibility in your hip joint? Okay, so now just come to sit again, but put your right hand underneath your right sit bone. So have the palm facing down and you're sitting on the back of your right hand. Now I'll just say this might not be so comfortable. So if you need to take your hand out at any point, that's fine. But as long as you can tolerate it, just have your hand under there and now rock a little forward and back. And you feel that you go forward on your hand, back on your hand, right? And now put your left hand on the front of your right knee and feel that as you roll towards the front of your hand, the knee pushes into your left hand and then it moves away as you roll towards the back of your hand. But now you're going to use your left hand to help you to do something different. As you roll towards the front of your right hand that you're sitting on, use your left hand to gently push your knee inwards towards yourself. And just see that it is possible, if you keep the movement small, to feel that you can go forward on the chair, forward on your hand, but also you can be drawing the top of your leg into the hip joint, and you're helping with a little push from your left hand, right? Okay, take the right hand out, bring your left hand back, maybe just rest both your hands on your legs, but feel how you're connected to the chair on the right side and the left side, and feel if there's a different sensation inside your right hip joint compared to the left. Is there a little more space in there maybe? Notice your breathing on the right, on the left. And then, of course, sit on your left hand. Put your right hand on the left knee, so reaching across with the right hand. And in the beginning, don't do anything with the right hand. Just rock forward and back on your left hand, on the left sit bone. And you can feel that probably the knee is just doing the same thing that the pressure on your hand is doing. Forward when you roll forward, back when you roll back. But then use the right hand to gently guide the whole length of your upper leg into the hip joint as you come forward on the chair. And you can feel you're doing something with your upper body, right? You're bringing your breastbone out over that knee. You can think of your head coming out over that knee, but the knee is coming in, right? And just try to imagine the surfaces sliding against each other inside your hip joint, because the pelvis is moving through space. The pelvis, which has that shape, which is the hip socket, it's moving through space, and the knee is moving through space. And they're moving in opposite directions, but there is that space. There is the capacity for the surfaces to slide in relation to each other inside the joint. Okay, and now come back to the middle and rock a little forward and a little back on the pelvis. But can you, as you come forward, have a sense of drawing your knees a little into you? And then they sort of maybe go forward again as your head comes back. Start to think that you want to stand up. Stay in the chair, but imagine this is the beginning of standing. Okay, pause for a moment. And so why is this important for coming to standing? Well, think that you're sitting in the chair, your knees are bent, aren't they? And then when you're standing, your knees, your legs will be straight, right? The backs of the knees will be completely open. So if you begin to come to stand right now without leaving the chair, but you take your knees forward, what's happening in the back of your knees? You're closing the back of your knees, aren't you? If the knees come forward, it's like you're bending them a little more, except what you're wanting to do is have the legs straight, because eventually you're going to want to stand. So what would it mean right from the beginning to be unfolding the legs even before you lift your bottom from the chair? So if you like, just put both hands on the front of your knees and just a couple of fingers as you lean your head forward out over your knees, just gently push a little inward with your fingers to feel that you could be drawing your legs kind of into the hip sockets. The knees do not go forward. A little bit of an unfriendly image is if you imagine some person was sitting there and they're holding a thumbtack right in front of your knee. You don't want to impale yourself on the thumbtack. You want to stand up, but you don't want to take your knees forward, right? And so you could think of your sit bones behind you and think that when you lift them off the chair, you're actually lifting them backwards. And now just see if you can use this image to actually come up into standing. And how was that? Now, depending on if you were really paying attention, you may or may not have caught it. But did you take your knees forward, or did you just unfold and come up? Now, before you sit down, again, we're going to do that mindfully, because sitting down is the reverse of standing up, isn't it? So again, the knees are going to bend, but think of reaching the pelvis slowly backwards as if you're reaching through the dark to find the chair with your sit bones, but take your head forward, 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 and very, very slowly feel that you kind of kiss the chair with your sit bones, and then you actually allow your full weight to come into the chair. All right. And now try something you did before. Lift your right leg and drop it. Lift your right leg and drop it. And then lift your right leg and stand up over your right leg. And then come back down into the chair, trying not to fall into the chair. And lift your left leg and drop it, and lift it and drop it. And then the next time you drop it, stand up over the left leg. And feel if there isn't a sense of drawing the knee into you when you drop the leg and immediately stand. And then come back to sit in the chair. And a couple of times you can lean back a little, but lift both feet off the floor and drop them. Or you could use your hands to sort of lift behind your knees, lift your legs and drop them. But then the next time you do it, as you're coming forward, as you drop your feet, keep your head coming forward and stand up, but drawing your legs into you. It's as if you're standing up in such a way that it's like you were trying to lift your feet off the ground again. Okay, come and sit in the chair. That last idea might make more sense if we just slow it down a little bit. So go back to imagining coming to stand and doing that first movement, but without coming to the chair. But imagine as you're coming forward to stand, it's as if you wanted to draw your knees up into your chest, except your feet are glued to the floor. But make that effort somewhere inside you as if you were going to try to lift your feet off the floor, but you can't do it because they're stuck to the floor. But feel how that same mobilization, it can pull your upper body forward. It can help you to flex in the hips. But see if you can do it in such a way that the knees are drawing into you. It's like you're drawing the ground up into your body. And then try using that idea to actually come all the way to standing. And then again, sit down by bending the knees, reaching back. And as you reach back, find just the most gentle contact you can with the chair, and then stand up again. Don't actually sit. So maybe if you did sit, practice this idea of coming to stand by unfolding up. And then when you're standing, you begin to sit, but don't ever sit fully in the chair. It's as if there was some trickster who might pull the chair out from under you at any moment. So you reach back and feel the chair with your bottom, but then you stand right back up. So it becomes reversible, right? You're ready to go in any direction at any time without preparation or hesitation. You could sit, but you could just as easily stand. Okay, come back into the chair. Just notice how you're sitting now. There's definitely been a fair amount of work with this standing up, sitting down, standing up, sitting down. But your sense of readiness now, your sense of poise, your sense of skeletal contact to the chair and your connection to the floor under your feet. Your breathing. So let's try one more thing to help clarify this really particular idea in the hip joints that's become so important here. So can you now reach your left hand over to the right side of your belly? So just have your left hand at the bottom of your belly on the right side and have the palm of your hand there. So it's to the right of your belly button. And now put the back of your right hand on the top of your right thigh. So the left hand is stuck to your belly and the back of the right hand is stuck to your thigh, and they're going to stay stuck there. But now if you wanted to bring the hands to touch, you could lift your leg, but you could also bring your belly towards your thigh. So can you turn yourself to the right as you lift your right leg as if you're going to stand on it, and keep your belly full. So your head will come out towards the right knee, but you're bringing your belly and your chest together, and you're keeping the belly full. You'll see if you try one time contracting your belly, what happens in the hip? Probably feel that the movement is not as smooth. So keep that space in the belly and bring the hands together, but the hands are stuck to the belly and the thigh. So it's really about bringing the thigh towards the top of your leg and the top of your leg towards your belly, and you turn yourself and feel how you use your left foot against the floor, because probably your left hip is lifting a little bit. Okay. And then change your hands over, put your right hand, the palm of your hand on the left side of your belly, the back of your left hand at the top of your left thigh. And again, keeping the hands kind of stuck to the belly and the thigh. Bring the hands together by bringing your belly and the top of your thigh together. And you're turning yourself now to the left. You're probably taking your head out towards the left knee. Feel what you do with your right foot and your right leg to support this, right? And then if you like, you can take your hands away and just, again, kind of walk in your chair as if you were walking up the stairs, but really think about keeping the belly open and bringing the belly towards one thigh and that thigh towards your belly and then the other from side to side. And then come to the middle and think that you're taking the bellies, one belly, but both thighs towards each other as you lift your sit bones up and back, and your head is coming out over your knees. And as you come to stand, maybe you're still taking your knees forward, but you have the idea of drawing them into you. And this is something that may take a little practice, and you can still be in your practice when you slowly come down to sit without crashing. You're practicing the same kind of thing. So this is the moment, though, to think that you're just rising. So imagine if someone had their hand on top of your head as you were coming to stand, how you would be lifting up through their hand. They could not compress you. But if your knees went forward, well, maybe they could compress you. So think that you're drawing your knees into you like you're actually drawing the ground up into your body. And then let's just have a little fun here at the end. So sit in your chair and then lift both feet, drop them and stand. Come back down, gently bringing your pelvis back onto the chair, and do that again. And just feel that you really pop up. And then the next time that you come all the way to stand, as you feel your head travel up, up, up in space, when you come to full standing, it's going to keep heading towards the ceiling because you're going to lift your legs, drop them, stand up, and then hop. Hop forward. And then turn, make sure you know where the chair is. And when you come back, reach yourself gracefully back down into the chair and then lift your legs, stand up and hop. And the next time you try it, if you like, you can hop. And then when you come down, you just hop again so that you have this sense that you're lifting, lifting, lifting. You're always lifting. And have fun with it. And then finally come to stand, stay standing, but still have that sense that your head is lifting, 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 lifting. It's as if you're levitating. And then you can begin to walk through the room, but rather than thinking that each time you put your foot down, your weight sinks, think instead that you're rising up away from the floor. You put your foot down only to lift your weight up out of the ground. And remember this idea of lifting the foot as if you're going to put your weight on it. So notice how you turn your chest. Do you want to turn your chest towards the leg that's coming forward or turn it away? Which one feels more like levitation? Which one feels more like sinking? And then stand again and just have this sense, right, that you're lifting up away from the ground. And imagine what it'd be like to stand like this, to be in conversation with someone like this, even to stand in front of an audience like this. Can you get a sense of being poised, being dignified? Or even, what does it mean to stand up for yourself, right? To be courageous. So get a sense of your kind of your emotional experience in this moment. And now just slightly slump back into some old familiar place, even just the tiniest amount. But now imagine standing and speaking with someone, standing in front of an audience, or standing up for yourself. And what's the relationship between your skeletal feeling in gravity and your emotional feeling in gravity? And then just renew that sense of rising and lifting. And this, again, is one of those days where if you have time after class, taking a walk outside might be a really wonderful thing to do. Okay. So thanks so much for your practice today, and we'll see you next time.